Dr. Nada Shabout is a professor of art history and the director of the Contemporary Arab and Muslim Studies Initiative at the University of North Texas, the founding president of the Association for Modern and Contemporary Art from the Arab World, Iran and Turkey. She's currently co-editing Modern Art of the Arab World, Primary Documents, part of the international program at the Museum of Modern Art, New York. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Nada Shabout.
Inviting me to talk about this topic. I have to admit that when I was first approached to talk about this topic, the most common thing that came to my mind is my work with looted Iraqi art, which is sort of a very depressing story. But instead, and I really, really can't believe that I'm going to say this as an American, that Trump actually gave me a very good idea because of his actions. I'm sure all of you are very aware of the travel ban, the first one, executive order that Trump issued, that sort of, there was an uproar everywhere about it, but the Museum of Modern Art in New York, MoMA, also responded to the ban by taking out of storage works that they had in their storage from the 7 countries that were on the ban. And one of the works is by the Sudan-born artist Ibrahim Salahi. Ibrahim Salahi, born in Durman in Sudan and is currently based in Oxford in the UK, is an artist who has been a very important artist for modernism in the Arab world as well as in Africa. He actually studied at the Slade School of Art in the UK, and he tells a very interesting story that when he finished his studies and returned to Sudan, very proud of the work that he did in London, which actually sort of arrived on a ship. It was shipped back home to Sudan. So he took them out, and had his first exhibition, but quickly realized that, his work was not getting the response that he imagined would get. And then he discovered that the reason for that is that the language that he was using was not resonating with the people, so that quickly made him change his style into something that found sources in Arabo-Islamic and African roots. And so he also, in fact, became part of a very important school known as the Khartoum School, where as a teacher in Khartoum at the academy, which was a colonial construct, but then and ironically, as part of that colonial construct, did teach calligraphy as classes. But when Al-Salahi worked there, he actually sort of changed the whole curricula where he would use local resources instead of doing, the masters and the still life sculptures. So as a young guy who changed his style, he actually had a trip to New York in 1962, went to New York City, liked it very much. During that trip, he actually met the African-American artist Jacob Lawrence. His trip was very short, so when he returned to Sudan, he wanted to find another way of returning to the United States, and he actually contacted the Rockefeller Foundation and was able to get a year-long fellowship with a program that included a generous trips around the country to major museums, art programs, colleges. He wanted to see the southern states in the US, but also took classes in printmaking and photography. So while he was there and from his first visit, he developed interest in Black Muslim sort of issues in struggles. And while he's at the Rockefeller Fellowship, he was aided by the Harmon Foundation, which was short-lived and but that championed African-American artists until its secession in 1967. So they introduced him to a number of artists, including the artist Palmer Hayden, who then introduced him to the Spiral Group. The Spiral Group was a collective of African-American artists initially formed by very well-known Black American artists, Romare Bearden, Charles Alston, Norman Lewis, and Hale Woodruff, and was formed on July 1963. One of the major issues that they were concerned with was that there was a disregard or I'm losing the word, I'm sorry, an acknowledgement of their work by major American institutions. So in response, they actually formed this collective and were having weekly meetings on Tuesdays, which Salahi started attending, where they were discussing an exhibition to have, which they called the first group showing works in black and white. So their idea of forming works in black and white was in protest to their exclusion from the major institutions. And of course, you know, black and white would sort of serves both socio-political as well as formal concerns. So Salahi liked the idea, but at first he was very concerned with the limitation of, you know, just black and white. So, you know, would actually not decide to participate in the exhibition until later, but also he kind of decided to not limit himself to black and white, although the white remains in the background, but he kind of added more color, like the burnt sienna that he mixed, and the crimson and the cobalt that he mixed with blue. So this work, the Mosque, is one of those works that he created in sort of collaboration or in conjunction with his attendance of the Spiral Group. So as the Harman Foundation would then also arrange a meeting for him with Alfred Barr, who was the director of MoMA at the time, and Al-Sarahi went there with a portfolio that included the work that is now at the Tate, which actually Alfred Barr liked very much and wanted to buy, but Al-Sarahi convinced him that it was a problematic work that was made on a very cheap material using two different kinds of paints, and it would be sort of a problem in the future. A problem I knew very well, as I actually then, in 2010, got that work and exhibited in the exhibition Interventions that was one of the inaugural exhibitions at Methaf, Arab Museum of Modern Art, where Salahi was telling me I commissioned him to do a couple of more works, but he was telling me about this work that, you know, has been hiding for so long, and it was a nightmare to restore, but, you know, it was such a beautiful work that, you know, we finally got it to exhibit it. So instead, Salahi convinced Barr to actually buy the Mosque, the black and white. And that work was then exhibited in 1965 as part of the recently acquired paintings and sculpture. And you can see, I mean, there's a long list of works that includes, you know, master European works amongst them, but as well as Salahi's work. So then, after that one exhibition, that work was in storage, as I said, until Trump, you know, managed to incite them to take it out of storage. And then it is now, I saw it last month, exhibited on the 5th floor, actually at the Picasso Hall. And with these works that are, you know, masterworks of European modernism, and on the wall, as a matter of fact, cross, that's where you see the, on the left, this is the Salahi work, the Mosque, which is actually quite a small work, but very powerful. And on the right, that's the wall, you know, opposite from it, which has, of course, the work of Picasso, Demoiselles d'Avignon. So this work, however, I mean, you know, this idea, this notion of trade, in this work, I mean, there's a double protest, clearly. You know, he made this work as part of protesting the exclusion of African-American artists from the work, but then, you know, it's now sort of showing as a sign of protest against the politics of today. And this is the work that I was referring to, which is now currently in the Tate. I'm finishing even before 5 minutes, don't worry. That is currently in the Tate, which is the work that Alfred Barr originally wanted to buy, but then, you know, Salahi talked him out of it. At the same building, when Salahi was living, one day there was an incident and there was this guy in an apartment underneath him. There was a flooding, something electrical happened, and he went up to the apartment of Ibrahim Salahi and saw some of his works. And Salahi just mentioned that MoMA just bought one of his works, so he actually bought a bigger work that I don't have access to that image. So we know there is another work that is somewhere in New York that is done by Ibrahim Salahi. Thank you.